Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
So today's lesson and the lessons that will follow over the next 3 weeks, I've told you are guiding principles. And they are principles that, as I look at my life personally and professionally, are principles that I really have lived my life by. And what is interesting is they were reinforced for me in a very concrete and specific way a number of years ago. John, my husband, and I were visiting our son Jonathan up at UC Berkeley when he was still a student. And at the business school at UC Berkeley, Haas Business School, they have direct principles. They have guiding principles as well. And when I read those principles, I thought, oh my gosh, I might have chosen slightly different words, but these principles are very much the way that I've attempted to live my life, and I believe are actually spiritual principles as well. And so the principles as they define them are questioning the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. Now think about those for a moment. If you look at them deeply, they really are spiritual principles and practices. Questioning the status quo. Questioning the status quo, and I would deepen that and spiritualize that by adding that we are to question the status quo while still accepting what is. And it sounds like a divine paradox, doesn't it? How do you question the status quo and still accept what is? Well, I'll be talking about that as I share the ideas with you this morning. The idea of questioning the status quo to me is the epitome of what Jesus did. We just came off of a beautiful and powerful Easter celebration together last week. We talked about the idea of what Jesus really stood for and talked about the idea of looking again, of not being fooled by appearances. Well, Jesus was a master teacher, a teacher of consciousness, and one that absolutely questioned the status quo, the norms of his day. Again and again, he would reflect back to the Old Testament, to the Mosaic Law, and say, you have heard that it was said of old. And when he said those words, he was referring to what we call the Old Testament. You have heard it said of old, but I say to you. And then he would go on to give a deeper, more insightful, more conscious teaching. He was questioning the status quo. And as I have thought about that more deeply, his questioning of the status quo has left us with some beautiful spiritual gifts. He questioned the status quo, the style of prayer that was common in his Jewish tradition. He questioned the approach to prayer. He said, you don't stand at the corner and pray to be seen by men. You don't do it that way. Prayer isn't that. Prayer is a private act of communion. You go into your closet, and he didn't mean a physical closet. You go into that inner state, shutting the door to all outer distractions. And there, in that consciousness, you pray to God. That was a radical idea. It was a radical idea. An idea in which he was questioning the status quo. He was saying there's a different way of doing it. And he gave us as well what we call the Lord's Prayer. He didn't call it that. When the disciples asked him, the only thing they asked him to teach them how to do was to pray. When he gave them the prayer that we call the Lord's Prayer, if you really look at it, it is a series of affirmations. That was a powerfully different way to pray. He questioned the status quo of who man is and who God is. And he said, and he treated God as Father, as close. And he invited us to do the same thing. That was a radical idea. That was an idea in which he was questioning the status quo. He gave a completely different understanding of religious life. He contrasted it again with the law of the Old Testament. He contrasted the 10 Commandments and gave us instead not things not to do, but gave us what? The Beatitudes. The Beatitudes, ways of being. He said it's not enough just to be like that. You've got to embody something different. Would you not say that these are some, and they're not the only ones, some fundamental ways that he questioned the norm, the religious norms of his day? He absolutely did. And you and I are the beneficiaries of his awakened consciousness, of his willingness to say, not that way, try it this way. As I was thinking about this idea of questioning the status quo, I was thinking that there are certain elements that are part of what goes into questioning the status quo. And there are three that I define for myself that I want to share with you. And they are these. I'll tell you what they are first, and then I'll go into each of them a bit. The first one is paying attention to what's not right. Paying attention to what's not right. Say that with me. Paying attention to what's not right. The second, an audacious belief in something better. Say that with me. An audacious belief in something better. What word do you think is really important in there? Audacious, right? An audacious belief in something better. And the last would be innovation. Innovation. So questioning the status quo, questioning doesn't resist. It opens us up to what can be. Think about that for a moment. Questioning doesn't have to resist, but it absolutely can open us to what can be, to what we haven't seen before or understood before. It opens us up to a whole realm of possibility. So this first idea, paying attention to what's not right, to what's not right, and not from the place of criticizing and complaining. Some of us are really good at paying attention to what's not right, but it's not enough just to pay attention to what's not right. We're going to have to do more than just that. But if you think about it, every single social movement was birthed as a result of someone or someone's paying attention to what wasn't right. Whether it was the end of slavery, whether it was the civil rights movement, whether it was the women's movement, whether it is the Me Too movement now, the Green movement, we could go on, but every social movement has been the result of an individual or individuals who have looked out and said of something going on in the human family, this isn't right. This isn't right. And doing something about it. Same thing is true in our personal individual lives. To pay attention to what's not right is to notice where there's a pinch. To notice where there is, I love this expression, where we feel divine discontent. Say that with me, divine discontent. Isn't that a whole lot better than just discontent? I find that when I can frame it that way for myself, and I really believe that that is a helpful way to frame it, divine discontent, that underlying feeling that something just isn't quite right. Can any of you relate to that? Any of you ever been there, right? Maybe you found your way into this place. In fact, a lot of times people find their way into a teaching, a spiritual teaching, because of that very thing. Something feels not right. Something feels missing, or something feels incomplete, or something feels unsatisfactory. And we go, what? Searching, looking, trying to understand. In our professional life, improvements are made out of the same mindset that notices what's not right, paying attention to what's not right. It's the idea of finding a need and filling it. Finding a hurt and healing it. And when we look through those ideas and not just stay stuck in the complaining, but rather in the noticing, we have something to work with to bring about a positive change. So the first is paying attention. The second, do you remember what it was? Good. Audacious belief, but we're going to do it with more energy. Audacious belief in something better. Say that with me. An audacious belief in something better. I find it infectious in the most positive way to be around people who have an audacious belief that things can be better. Do you believe that things can be better? That sounded rather lukewarm. Do you believe that things can be better? Yes. Okay, I do too. An audacious belief in something better. I want to read to you words that I bet you have heard before, but they are inspiring, and they come from the late Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Do any of you in this room feel like there's some work to do? That there are some things in our world that need to be changed? Yeah. Some of us might say, hell yes. Hell yes. 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 I think of Jesus. I think of him saying, holding this audacious belief about humanity. Know ye not that ye are gods? Radical idea, audacious idea. That the kingdom of heaven will not come with observation. They will not say, lo, it is there, lo, it is there. For the kingdom of heaven is where? Within you. That was audacious. That meant you didn't need an intermediate, I'll get it right. You didn't need an in-between, something between you and God. God's within you and you are within God as well. That's an audacious belief in who and what we are as men and women. And the beautiful thing to me about that is we can't destroy it. We didn't create it. We didn't put that in us. It is what we are. It is what we are in essence. All that God is, you are that. And to the degree that we begin to live and think and act from that, we will totally transform our world. Things like what happened yesterday at the synagogue would never happen again. But we've got work to do. No one of us can do all of it, but every single one of us can do some piece of it right where we are. So the audacious belief in something better. One of the most powerful lines in the Old Testament is the line, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Moses used the idea of the vision of the promised land to keep his people motivated to get there. Now, they had a lot of problems along the way. They were a rather difficult group to lead with a rather reluctant leader. And we're told that even Moses only got to the edge of the promised land. And metaphysically, it's teaching us that there's a certain attitude of consciousness that must die out for us to really enter in to what we would call the promised land. But without a vision of what is possible, without holding on to what we believe we are called to be as people, we will never get there. So do not let any news that you hear, do not let any naysayer, do not let any person in your workplace, in your neighborhood, or in your family take away from you your audacious belief of what is possible. We need each of us to be a prophetic voice. A prophetic voice. A prophetic voice is a voice that can look and see what is, but can also speak to what is possible. I love the verse in Hebrews that says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is a substance. It's not airy-fairy. It's solid. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the audacious belief that something can be better and that you have a part to play in what that something better is all about. Audacious belief, faith challenges the status quo. It disrupts the norm. It allows you to see what is possible and not get stuck at what is currently appearing to be limited. Faith is the audacious belief that David had when he fought Goliath. Nobody else wanted to come up against the Philistine, the giant, because he was too big. You remember this story from Sunday school, right? But David's attitude, he had such audacious faith and belief. His attitude was as if he was saying, he is so big, I can't possibly miss the guy. That's the kind of attitude we have to have. The problem is so big, we can't possibly miss making at least a positive dent in it, right? Right. And the last, it's not enough to pay attention to what's not working or what's broken or what's missing. And it's not enough just to have an audacious belief. Faith without works is what? Dead. Faith without works is dead. We need to innovate. We need some curiosity and creativity that results in the attempt to bring forth something new. And we may not have any guarantees that what we attempt or how we choose to innovate is actually going to be the thing that works, but we can't let that be the reason we don't try. What's the saying in business of late? To fail fast or something like that. Do I have it right, Rich? To fail fast? The idea of innovating, of trying. What is it about a rocket when it's set off to its target? It's like off course, like 80 or 90% of the time. It's always correcting itself on course. That's what it's like for you and me. When we're innovating, whether we're talking about in our individual lives, innovating in our family dynamics, innovating in our communities, innovating in our workplaces, innovating in our societies. There's a lot of trial and error, but we have to be okay with that because eventually we're going to hit upon something that works. And it requires a certain amount of curiosity, the kind of curiosity that is willing to stop long enough to ask the right question. I think it was Einstein who said that if he was given a really, really challenging problem, a big problem that his life depended upon getting answered correctly, and he only had an hour to try to solve the problem, that he would spend the first 55 minutes trying to figure out what the right question was, so that he could then get the right answer. And yet, don't we have a kind of backwards, if you think about our educational system, in many ways, we don't set our teachers up to be successful in raising really smart kids. It seems as if we put so many barriers to them, not just that we don't pay them what they're worth and what they need, but in many ways we put a lot of barriers to them. And we create a system that seems to be about making sure you get the right answer as fast as you possibly can. And over time, we squelch the natural curiosity of children, which kids want to know why, right? They're always asking questions, always asking questions. We have to encourage the ability to ask skillful questions. Why are things the way that they are? How could we do them differently? And we have to make it safe that innovation can come from anyone and anywhere, not just from the experts. In fact, sometimes that's not where we're going to get it from. What's the expression? An expert is one who knows more and more and more and more about less and less and less. And to some extent, there's some truth in that. But you take somebody who, there's a word for this in Japanese culture, I think it's shoshin. It's the beginner's mind. And that in the beginner's mind, there are infinite possibilities. And it's out of that beginner's mind that true curiosity births good questions that pull forward out of the universe and out of others powerful new right answers. We also need to support creativity. And to me, creativity is the ability to connect the dots between seemingly completely unrelated things. People who are creative see things differently than those who are not. They connect all sorts of dots. How many of you have an item in your car or in your home that uses Velcro? Raise your hand. You know what Velcro is, right? Do you know how Velcro came to be? Yeah? It was this guy connecting some really strange dots. This man walking his long-haired dog through the wild, and his dog would always pick up little burrs. And the man didn't like having to try to get all those burrs out of his dog. And so he decided to look at one under a microscope. Because have you ever had a dog with a burr in its fur? They are hard to get out, right? He connected the dots. He took that little burr under a microscope because he had a creative, innovative, curious mind. And noticed how the burr, the shape of the burr, that it had almost like a hook, like a crochet hook. And that hook quality was what was attaching with great strength to the dog's fur. And he figured, hey, I could mimic that and create a really strong fastener. And he did. And he did. What genius lies within you? Don't let anybody say you don't know enough, you're not educated enough, or you don't have enough experience to innovate, whether it's in your life personally or in a classroom or where you work or in your neighborhood. You do have far more talent and ability than you ever have given yourself credit for. Can I have an amen to that? Amen. Do you believe that about your neighbor, the person sitting right next to you? Do you believe it equally about yourself? Isn't it true sometimes it's easier to believe something really great about our friend, and sometimes we just have a hard time believing that about ourselves? Anybody experience that? That's where partners in believing or prayer partners or faith partners are so important, because they can mirror for us and remind us of the things that we sometimes forget. The things we sometimes forget. So I want to close with this guiding principle and really encourage you to keep alive. If all you keep alive in your mind from this lesson is the idea to question the status quo, if you keep that gently in the forefront of your mind, you will see the opportunities in your life that are here right now for you to question the status quo. And if you are willing to question the status quo and not just turn your back on it, I bet you're going to find a piece of what you can contribute to making your family or your workplace or this community or our world a better place. We really are about both ends of our mission statement. We really are about the individual work that expresses outward into the collective. God bless you. Namaste.
Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.